Welcome everyone to the JW the DM channel. I am, of course, JW the DM, and for the next several videos, we're going to talk about getting your players to stay engaged and invested in your game by making them really feel like their characters are living, breathing people with compelling stories. You'll find that the more players are into their characters, the more they are engaged in the game and they have more fun overall. It also elevates tension. The stakes are higher when the PCs achieve great goals or when they fail and possibly die. Which, by the way, is the only real danger here. Some players are happy to work up hundreds of characters and to try new ones when one has died. Other players get a little vested in their characters and get very, very upset when their characters die, especially if they've come up with good backstories and they die early. Make sure your players have their expectations managed regarding the possibility of death in your campaign. Today we'll talk about step 1 of 4 overarching steps for using backstories for player engagement, and that is getting a backstory created in the first place. By the way, not every player wants to do such work. Maybe they just like combat and call it a day. Don't worry about it. Do this with willing participants and people you think you can convert. I've succeeded at some conversions and it always is kind of fun. Anyway, you'll want to be part of the creation of each character, as you will be the one familiar with the ins and outs of your campaign and campaign world, and what's happening with the other player characters being developed. However, it's not an equal partnership. The players' desires for their characters should take priority. Granted, there will be guardrails that should have been established in Session 0, such as only character classes from these books. There is no guns or gunpowder weapons. These are the species that exist in this world. No edgelords, etc. But the rest is up to the player, with them making changes based on your advisement. There are exceptions to this rule, and we'll get into that. But 90% of the time, the player should get the final say. But how do we actually create the backstory? What information will need to be known? Well, the easiest way to get that is to give your players a questionnaire. Use, or create if you must, a good questionnaire to give to your players. You can find many online from all sorts of sources. I've got links to several in the description below. Have your players keep the answers relatively short, to the best of their ability. And this exercise is meant to let both you and the player know the fundamentals of the character in the most efficient way possible while still being thorough. Let me go over 7 things that I think a good questionnaire should have. 1. Goals. This is going to be the longest section here. The goals are best broken down into 3 types: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Short-term goals are things like A. Talk to the guy in the next village over about the cult he encountered. B. Take a castle guard out for drinks and find out what they know about the MacGuffin, although you haven't made any friends out of one yet. C. Find the treasure in this dungeon, assuming a smallish dungeon. D. Find someone to design my castle. Don't confuse short-term goals with intermediate goals. Intermediate goals are like open that door or say something to the person I'm already talking to. They also include things like paying the bartender, hailing a cab on a busy street, or going to sleep. Don't worry about those goals. Smaller goals are ones that have some number of even smaller steps that have to be done to accomplish the goal, including immediate goals and slightly longer than immediate goals. Smaller goals might be related to medium-term goals, but some are just goals in and of themselves, and others just enable another small goal. Now, medium-term goals are things like A. Find and hopefully stop the cult the guy will tell us about. B. Get an audience with the monarch about the MacGuffin the guard knows about. C. And D. Using treasure from multiple looted dungeons to pay for my building, my castle. Like many small-term goals, medium-term goals are either goals in and of themselves or they are milestones for achieving a long-term goal. Finally, long-term goals are things like A, saving the world and retiring to a farm somewhere. B, becoming king myself. And C, becoming the Lord Protector of a region from my castle. Long-term goals are big. Sometimes multiple big long-term goals can be accomplished in a campaign. Sometimes they're so long that they can only be realized at the end of a campaign or in an epilogue. But these should, as long as the player and the character are still interested in them, be a driving force behind some of the character's actions. Now, there's more to creating a backstory than goals, however, and I promise the next 6 things I think are important for a questionnaire go a lot faster. But before I get to number 2, while you're here, why not go ahead and like the video and subscribe to my channel? I'll appreciate it immensely and send good karma your way. Now, number 2 of the 7 things for backstory is friends and family. Have the player come up with a childhood friend or two, maybe a memorable adventure that they had, and then have the player decide, are they still friends? Do they keep in touch? Then the player should do the same for any current friends of their character, if there are any. And then don't forget family, parents, siblings, etc., names, relation, how they felt about them, so forth. The way the questions are designed usually also include communities and lifestyle, origins as well as how they're living currently. Where were they raised? Were they rich, poor, middle class? Did they have a hobby? What was the community like? What kind of people were most honored there? And how did they live now? Rich, poor, middle class? What do they do when not adventuring? Where do they live? Number 4, enemies. These don't have to be serious enemies, although they could be. Whether there is an arch nemesis or a rival or an entire organization, who might actively work against the character? And are there more than one? Number 5, career. Previous and or current. What did the character do before adventuring or between adventures? Now this is pretty straightforward. In D&D and 5e games in general, this is covered partially by the concept of backgrounds. But here it's meant to get into more detail and cover any changes from what the books have. Number 6, why adventure? What got them into adventuring? This one is pretty important, I believe. It could be anything from just wanting to go out and see the world, or to revenge for their village being burned down. Or it could be that they ran up debts and need to run away from the debtors before they can acquire the funds to pay back the debt. The sky is the limit. And number 7, accepting the immediate quest. What will have them accept the current quest? Another very important one for kicking off the campaign and having the player invested in upholding the social contract of having their character not refuse the initial quest or quests, and to generally make decisions that they believe progress party goals. The sky is the limit on this one too. I'll give an example from the last time I ran The Lost Mine of Phandelver. I had the players make up reasons why their characters would want to take on a job that would get them to leave the city of Neverwinter and to go to a small middle-of-nowhere village like Phandalin. One of the players came up with a great story about being on the run from no less than 3 organizations, including the City Watch, due to a smuggling job gone south. This led to several encounters that happened before the first published encounter, including a city chase scene. It was awesome. Now, you may need to be extra keyed into helping the player here, and this might be where you have the most need to override the occasional choice of the player. Be careful not to fully step on their toes, but making sure that the backstory dovetails nicely into the start of a campaign is something you'll want to have collaborated on. Be flexible, try to accommodate when you can, and make suggestions for alternatives when you can't. You want the player truly invested in the work and happy with the result. Remember, A bullet point backstory, essentially, is using the information provided in the questionnaire. Rationalize the goals of the character to both your and the player's satisfaction, and you're done. Granted, it's not in prose form, but bullet points or small descriptions is all that's needed at this point. If you or one or several of your players want to write something out narratively, well, that's up to you and them. Personally, I actually love a good short narrative. Let me review the 7 things that should be in a good background questionnaire. 1. Goals. Number 2. Friends and family. Number 3. Communities and lifestyle. Number 4. Enemies. Number 5. Career. Number 6. Why adventure. Number 7. Accepting the immediate quest. Now, these 7 areas are especially great to work on during character creation, but they are also helpful even if you're well past that point. Sometimes a character dies and the player is about to slot in a character they rolled up 10 years ago, and working on this will help slot them into your campaign. If your players are willing to spend maybe an hour or 2 on creating this background, it'll give you what you need to effectively do part 2. Spotlight the characters with things related to their past and present. But we'll get to that next week. Meanwhile, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and set the notifications, that bell icon in subscribe, to all so you're alerted for the next week's video. Till then, may all your games be full of glory. Take care.